The civilian life and a disturbing call. If you drove past her house on Waco Street in Fort Collins, Colorado, you'd probably miss it. Just another plain, two-story home with tan vinyl siding and a mailbox hanging on by one screw. Nothing flashy, no meticulously manicured garden, certainly no welcoming mat. The woman who lived there, Danielle Mercer, didn't make waves, she liked it that way. Most mornings, you'd see her walking to her black 2006 Tacoma, a reusable coffee cup in hand, hair tied back, aviator sunglasses on, moving with the rhythmic precision of a well-oiled machine. Like clockwork, she'd head to Ryland Systems, a government defense contractor out in Loveland, where she was buried behind a desk, shuffling inventory schedules and writing logistics reports. She was quiet, efficient, reliable. People in the office said she kept to herself, a ghost in the cubicle farm, but always met her deadlines. Her supervisor once remarked that she was the kind of employee who could disappear for 2 weeks and still be ahead of schedule. She never talked about family, never brought anyone to the dreaded company picnic, and she never, ever stayed late. When the clock hit 4:30 p.m., she was already gone, the faint scent of her morning coffee the only proof she'd been there. There were rumors, of course. Whispers that she'd been in the military, that she had some kind of top-secret clearance. One guy swore he saw her name on a Department of Defense memo once, back when he interned at the Pentagon. But nobody pushed. She gave off a vibe, not aggressive, just final. Like a door you knew better than to knock on. What nobody knew, not her co-workers, not her neighbors, not even the guy she dated for 3 months in 2021, was that Danielle, or Danny Mercer as she was once known, used to be a fighter pilot. Not just any pilot either. She flew F-35s, ran missions over Eastern Europe, logged over 2,000 hours in hostile airspace. Her call sign was Echo, a whisper of a forgotten life. And for 8 years, she'd meticulously buried every trace of that life, every memory, every scar, like a bad dream she desperately wanted to forget. But bad dreams, as she was about to discover, don't stay buried, especially when the people who created them still knew your name. One quiet Saturday morning, around 6:45 a.m., Danny stood barefoot in her kitchen, the worn wood cool beneath her feet. She was flipping through a stack of expired coupons, trying to decide if she could justify a grocery run. She had sweatpants on, an old US Air Force hoodie draped over one shoulder, and Luther Vandross playing low from her phone, his soft, smooth voice filling the otherwise empty silence. Then her phone buzzed. A number she hadn't seen in years. One that should have been erased, blocked, gone from her life forever. Her hand paused over the screen, hovering over the unknown caller ID. Her stomach turned in a slow, familiar knot. Not panic, not yet, just memory. That cold rush that starts in your chest and spreads, a creeping dread, before your brain can even catch up. She didn't answer. She just stared at the glowing screen until the call ended. Then, with a deliberate motion, she shut the phone off and slid it into a kitchen drawer, as if she could seal away the intrusion. 10 minutes later, someone knocked on her front door. 3 short taps, firm, with a military rhythm that made her muscles tense instinctively. Danny didn't move, holding her breath. Whoever was out there didn't knock again. They just slid a plain white envelope under the door and left. She waited, unsure how long, 5 minutes, maybe 10, the silence in her house suddenly oppressive. Then, slowly, cautiously, she picked it up. No name on the front, just a stark stamp, Department of the Air Force, Office of Special Projects. Inside, she found a single photo, an aerial shot, blurry, taken with night vision. 2 fighter jets. One marked with US insignia. The other, dark, unmarked. And a sticky note, small but devastating, "We know who the other pilot is, and we know you trained him." Her fingers curled tight around the paper, crinkling it. Her throat went dry, a sudden, aching emptiness. It had been 8 years. 8 years since what happened in Syria. 8 years since she handed in her wings and told them she was done. No ceremony, no send-off, just silence. She was supposed to be invisible now. She'd signed the agreements, kept her head down, did everything right. But somehow, they still found her. And the worst part. The other pilot. The one in that blurry photo. She already knew who it was. Nikolai Dragunov. But she never thought he'd come back. She never thought he'd turn. The moment she saw that photo, she understood one thing. Whatever fragile peace she thought she had, it was over. And somebody wanted her back in the air. But before she could even stop them, they'd already set the wheels in motion. The low, gnawing instinct that had never steered her wrong compelled Danny to move. She didn't have orders yet, and she certainly didn't plan to follow them, but something primal insisted she act. She packed a small bag, mostly just essentials, no phone, no GPS. She knew she was being watched, could almost feel the phantom weight of surveillance settling on her. If she didn't disappear now, she might not get another chance. By noon, she was behind the wheel of her black 2006 Tacoma, heading south on I-25. The route was etched into her muscle memory, a phantom limb of her past life. She hadn't driven it in nearly a decade, but every bend of the road, every familiar billboard, came back to her like an old scar, throbbing faintly with rediscovered pain. 12 hours later, she crossed into Texas. Not the city parts, not Austin or Dallas, places teeming with anonymous crowds. She kept going, through Amarillo, through Lubbock, then miles and miles of flat, desolate nothingness until the highway turned to cracked county roads and pickup trucks with one working headlight. She stopped at a rundown motel off Route 287, cash only, no ID needed, a place where transients and ghosts found temporary refuge. She left the key under the mat in the morning, a final severance from that brief, unsettling anonymity. 2 hours later, she pulled into a place called Rock Creek Ranch, a dried-up stretch of land outside of Wichita Falls. It used to belong to her uncle, a quiet, stoic man who died in '09. Nobody else in the family wanted it, not with its caved-in barn, its sagging porch, and the weeds that had grown tall enough to hide snakes. But Danny had kept the deed, drawn to its silence, its remoteness. This wasn't what she came for. She parked the Tacoma behind the dilapidated house and walked 100 yards past the fence line, through the overgrown mesquite, down into a shallow depression marked by an old, rusted windmill that hadn't turned in years. And there it was. Half buried under a rotting blue top and 6 inches of red dirt. A storage locker, sealed with 3 heavy-duty padlocks. Danny knelt, digging at the hard, red earth with her bare hands until she could free the locks. Inside were things she swore she'd never touch again, relics of a life she'd painstakingly tried to erase. A flight suit, the material still faintly smelling of jet fuel and sweat. Her old helmet, matte black, her call sign Echo painted in stark silver across the top. A thumb drive. And a worn leather folder with Department of Defense tags. Inside the folder were transcripts, debriefings, mission logs from 2017. Her last deployment, the one she was never supposed to talk about, the one that broke her. She flipped through the pages slowly, her breath steady but shallow, the dry Texas wind whipping through her old hoodie. Then she stopped. A name. Nikolai Dragunov. Back then, he was just a young Bulgarian pilot who trained with the US under joint exercises. Quiet, intelligent, spoke perfect English. She'd trained him herself, twice, once in Germany, once in Nevada. He'd been a good kid, a natural in the air. She remembered thinking he reminded her of herself at 24. Too fast, too sure, maybe a little too reckless. And maybe that's why she'd ignored the subtle, fleeting signs. He vanished from the radar the same week Danny resigned. No one talked about it. No one filed a report. Until now. Somehow, he'd resurfaced. Flying stolen tech. Copied maneuvers. US tactics. And if the envelope on her floor was right, they thought she knew something. Or worse, that she had trained him to do it on purpose. That wasn't just suspicion. That was a setup. She sat down in the dirt, staring at the open locker, her fingers clenched around that folder. The Texas wind tugged at her clothes, but she didn't flinch. She hadn't touched this part of her life in years, truly believed she could run from it, bury it out here under dry brush and bitter regrets. But the past doesn't rot, not when governments hold the copies. She knew how this worked. They'd ask her questions with answers already decided. They'd threaten charges, say she was involved, say she let him slip. They wouldn't care what really happened on that mission in 2017, the incident that sent 2 jets into blackout territory and came back with only one. And they'd want her to fly again. Not as punishment. As bait. She stood up, brushed the dirt off her knees, and zipped the folder shut. This wasn't about redemption. This was a trap. And she wasn't going to walk into it without her eyes wide open. But someone else already knew she came here. And they were waiting. Danny drove back to Colorado in silence, no music, no radio, just the rhythmic hum of tires against asphalt and that old, hollow thrum in her chest. It was the same feeling that used to hit her right before a mission. Not fear, not panic, but something else, something quieter, like resignation infused with a pulse. She didn't go straight home. She made 2 cautious loops around her neighborhood, took a different exit off the main road, and parked 5 blocks away, just in case. When she finally walked up her porch steps, everything looked untouched. No broken windows, no strange vehicles. But the doormat was crooked, and Danny never left it like that. She stepped inside. No lights, no movement, but the air felt subtly altered, a change so minute it would be imperceptible to anyone not trained to notice the tiniest shifts. The curtain didn't hang quite straight, and there was a faint fingerprint on the fridge handle, oriented in the opposite direction from how she opened it. Whoever had been inside was smart, professional. They hadn't taken anything, just looked. Maybe copied files from her laptop. Maybe planted something. She grabbed her backup phone, a prepaid burner hidden in the back of her junk drawer, and dialed a number she'd memorized years ago but hadn't used since the day she walked away. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered, "Merc." "Don't call me that," she said, her voice tight. The voice on the other end chuckled softly. "You called me." "I didn't give permission to use my name or to access my home," Danny retorted, a surge of controlled fury rising. "You think that matters now?" The voice was calm, too calm. She closed her eyes. "How bad is it?" A pause. "You trained him, Danny. You know what he's capable of. He took out one of ours last week over the Adriatic. No call sign. No authorization. He's flying like a ghost. And you think I'm going to what, lecture him out of the sky?" She scoffed, a bitter taste in her mouth. "We think you're the only one who can predict him." Danny shook her head, even though he couldn't see it. "No. You want me in the cockpit. That's what this is really about." Another pause. "Meet me at Cheyenne Mountain tomorrow. 0500. Come clean, Mercer, or we'll assume the worst." Then the line went dead. Danny stared at the burner phone in her hand. That voice belonged to Lieutenant Colby Jensen, a man who'd once been her CO, who'd vouched for her when nobody else did, the same man who'd tried to talk her out of resigning after Syria. Now he was the one laying down threats. She stayed up that night, the folder from Texas open on her kitchen table. The reports. The flight data. The mission logs. And her own notes, the ones she'd scrawled by hand the day after the crash, never submitted, never shared. Because what happened that day wasn't pilot error. Wasn't weather. Wasn't enemy fire. It was sabotage. Dragunov had shut off comms, broke formation, then vanished. She'd chased him for 36 miles before being ordered to stand down. The other pilot, Lieutenant Grant Fowler, didn't survive. But Danny knew Dragunov hadn't killed him directly, not with a missile, not even with a shot. He just left him out there, alone, outnumbered, and exposed. And the Pentagon, in its infinite wisdom, had let the whole thing disappear. They let her walk away, on paper. They called it burnout. But deep down, Danny always knew the real reason. They were afraid of what she'd say if she stayed. Now, they wanted her back. Not because they believed in her, but because they needed a shield. A scapegoat. Someone to throw in front of Dragunov and hope he blinked. At 4 a.m., she pulled into a diner off Highway 85, just outside of Cheyenne. 2 truckers sat in the back, half asleep over their coffee. A waitress with a limp scribbled orders with one hand and wiped her eyes with the other. Danny sat at the far end of the counter, ordered eggs she wouldn't eat, and waited. At 4:23 a.m., Jensen walked in. He didn't wear a uniform, but he still moved like he was reporting for duty. He sat across from her, pulled a file from his coat, and set it on the table. Before he could speak, she said, "You're not telling me everything." He looked tired. "Of course I'm not. You wouldn't have shown up if I did." She nodded slowly. He opened the file. A new photo. Satellite. Dragunov's jet, clear as day. That's a modified F-35. Our engine, our stealth. But he's using non-standard control systems. Custom coding. Someone helped him, Danny. From inside. And you think it's me? She said flatly. No, he said, looking her in the eye, his gaze unwavering. I think you're our best shot at stopping him before he sells that tech to someone who will crash it into Los Angeles. She sat back in the booth. The truckers laughed at something behind her. The waitress dropped a fork. Everything outside their corner of the diner felt normal. But none of it was. Because Danny wasn't a civilian anymore. Not really. And she couldn't pretend to be. But accepting that meant going back into the cockpit. And facing what she'd left behind. Danny didn't sleep that night. She spent it in a motel near the airbase, staring at the ceiling while the TV played static in the background. Her bag sat unopened by the door, she hadn't even taken off her boots. At 0500, she stepped through the gates at Cheyenne Mountain Complex. No salute, no greetings, just a silent escort and 3 sets of reinforced doors. The hangar was colder than she remembered, harsher somehow, less like a place for machines and more like a vault for secrets. They'd pulled her bird out of storage. Same tail number, same familiar scratches on the left wing. She knew the jet better than she knew her own reflection. The F-35 Lightning II. Quiet, quick, deadly. She used to call it her second skin. A tech walked over, clipboard in hand. Young guy, maybe mid-20s, nervous energy all over him. You're cleared for a 20-minute familiarization loop, he said, his voice a bit too high. Simulated targeting only. We'll be monitoring your vitals. Danny raised an eyebrow, a silent question about trust. He looked down, fidgeting. I just, do what I'm told, She didn't respond. In the locker room, she suited up. The material felt stiff at first, too tight around the chest, unfamiliar against her skin. But once the helmet clicked into place, something in her breathing changed, slower, sharper, like her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, and held her hand over the throttle for a beat too long. One push, and she was airborne. The air hit her hard at first, thin, fast, loud. But then came the rhythm, the smooth angles, the dips, the control, like swimming in air. She banked left, dipped low, tracing the curve of the Rockies like it was muscle memory. And in a way, it was. Base control crackled in her headset. Echo, you're clear. Simulate lock-on at waypoint Alpha. She spotted the target on her HUD, an old model drone hovering just below cloud cover. She clicked twice. Target locked. Copy that. Proceed to waypoint Bravo. She moved faster, each command sharper than the last, no hesitation. Then she heard a voice she didn't expect. Nice to hear you back on comms, Echo. It wasn't Jensen. It was him. Dragunov. He'd hacked into the channel. How's the altitude up there? Does it still sing the way you remember? Her heart kicked hard in her chest. She didn't respond. Come on, he said, his voice calm, unshaken, eerily familiar. I know you're listening. We used to talk better than this. Why now? She said finally, keeping her eyes ahead, her voice flat, emotionless. Because I knew you'd come, he replied, a chilling certainty in his tone. They always bring their broken toys back out when the fire gets too close. You killed Fowler. The words ripped from her, sharp and raw. I left Fowler with his choices, he said coldly, without a hint of remorse. Same as I left you. She clenched her teeth. Where are you? She asked, her voice low. Oh, Danny, that's not how this works anymore. You're flying in circles. I'm writing the map. Then the channel cut dead. Silence. Control, did you get that? She asked, her voice now urgent. Nothing, came the flat reply. She was alone. Alone in the air, 32,000 feet above everything. And suddenly, she understood. This was more than just a rogue pilot. This was a message. He wanted her up here. He wanted her attention. And he knew exactly how to get it. Back on the ground, they scrambled to trace the breach, but it was too late. He was gone before they even knew he was there. She stepped off the tarmac, helmet in hand, face unreadable. Jensen walked toward her. "We're pulling your access until we figure out how he got in." "No, you're not," she said, her voice firm, resolute. He blinked. "Excuse me. I'm not your liability anymore. I'm your only shot." He studied her for a long moment. "You really want back in?" She didn't answer that. She just looked at the sky, a vast, indifferent canvas. But this wasn't just about flying anymore. It was about everything they never told her the first time. Danny hadn't just been a pilot, she'd been an instructor, a mentor, and the first time she saw Dragunov fly, she'd whispered the same thing every other instructor had muttered behind closed doors. "He doesn't pilot the aircraft, he owns it." Back then, it was a compliment, a testament to his raw talent. Now, it felt more like a warning she'd tragically ignored. For the next 2 days, Danny stayed on base. They called it protocol, she called it surveillance. She wasn't stupid. They didn't trust her, not really, not with what Dragunov knew, not with how quiet she'd been since she left. Jensen handed her a stack of flight recordings, footage from recent sightings of the rogue aircraft. Each video was the same, a US-built jet skimming terrain in impossible weather, outmaneuvering drones, vanishing from radar before anyone could blink. "Watch this," Jensen said, pausing one of the clips mid-frame. The aircraft in the video flipped upside down just before entering a canyon ridge, a maneuver that violated basic flight safety protocols. Danny tilted her head. "That's not reflex," she said, her voice a quiet certainty. Jensen nodded. "It's a signature." He played another clip, same maneuver, different location. "Where was this?" she asked. "Utah, 3 days ago." Another clip, New Mexico, 5 days before that. It was like he was taunting them, leaving behind breadcrumbs, but only for someone who knew how to read them. "His flying the way I taught him," Danny said quietly. "But his mixing in something else. Foreign system architecture, maybe European." She leaned back, closed her eyes. "There's a pattern here." "You think he's trying to communicate?" Jensen asked, skeptical. "No," she said, her eyes still closed. "I think he's showing me something. Proving that he's better now, that he's taken everything I gave him and built something we can't stop." She stood. "I need to fly again. This time with a tracker on. I want to draw him out." Jensen looked hesitant. "He's not just going to show up for a dogfight." "He already did," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Last time in the air, that wasn't just a breach. That was a test." She didn't say the rest aloud, that maybe, just maybe, he wanted her to follow him, not stop him. They gave her clearance the next morning. A new bird, no tail number, an experimental build, a hybrid between the F-35 and a newer stealth prototype still in trials. She flew for hours, high altitude, low sweeps, silent comms. Nothing. On the 4th run, something changed. It started with a flicker on her radar, just a blip, too fast, too far. Then came the sound, not through her headset, but through the jet itself, feedback, static, then a voice. "You found my trail, Echo." Her blood went cold. "I thought maybe you'd forgotten. Buried me. But here you are." "Where are you?" she said, her voice even. "Behind you," he replied, that unnervingly calm voice, like always. She checked her 6, saw nothing visible, but her sensors began flickering, scrambling, shifting, resetting mid-air. He was jamming her, but not fully, just enough to toy with her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice strained. "You trained me to be better, faster, unseen. Now I am." "This isn't a contest," she gritted. "Of course it is. You just stopped playing." She clenched her teeth. "What do you want, Dragunov? You left me up there in Syria. You followed orders, watched me go dark, didn't even try to stop it." "I tried," she said through her teeth. "Not hard enough." The line went dead. And just like that, he was gone again. No trace. No lock. Nothing. She landed 20 minutes later, hands trembling as she removed her gloves. Jensen was waiting. He was there, she said. I know. We caught part of the signal. His not hiding. His inviting me. Jensen didn't look surprised. We picked up an encrypted burst on a closed military frequency. We're trying to trace the source now. What did it say? He handed her a printout. It was coordinates. And one phrase, come finish what you started. But Danny couldn't finish something she didn't fully remember, and that was the part that scared her most. They never let her talk about what happened in Syria. Officially, the mission was marked as aborted due to hostile interference. Internally, it was listed under a blacked-out operation name, one of those cryptic phrases that sound vague enough to mean anything. Project Torchline. But Danny remembered every second. She sat alone in a briefing room deep beneath the mountain, replaying the same 12-minute loop on a grainy screen. The night of March 18, 2017. 2 jets in the air, her and Lieutenant Fowler. The mission was supposed to be a quick run, identify movement on the Syrian-Turkish border, relay heat signatures, and return. No fire, no chase, no contact. Dragunov was never supposed to be there. But 37 minutes into the flight, he appeared, unannounced, flying a jet no one recognized. Not Russian, not NATO, something custom. Danny had called it in, asked for verification. She had asked 3 times before command finally responded, and by then Fowler was already dead. It didn't happen in an explosion, no debris, no warning. His jet went black, lights, power, communication. Then it nose-dived into the sand at 800 knots. Gone. Danny circled, screamed into the air. Pilot down. Confirm recovery unit. No response. Then she heard him. Dragunov. You should leave now, he said calmly. They've already decided what this will look like. She'd asked him what the hell he was talking about. He didn't answer. And she didn't fire. She couldn't. He wasn't marked as hostile. He wasn't even supposed to be there. By the time she landed, command had already drafted the story. A mechanical failure, no enemy presence, a solemn note for Fowler's family. Danny argued. She filed 3 protest reports, tried to escalate. They told her to stand down. She was warned, gently at first, then firmly. So she walked. She packed up, turned in her flight badge, and moved to Colorado. She told herself she was done. Told herself it wasn't her fault. But it was, because she hadn't pushed hard enough. She hadn't made them listen. Now Fowler was gone, and Dragunov wasn't just alive. He was turning the ghost of that night into a threat with teeth. Jensen slid a thick folder across the table. Internal review from 2017, he said. Some of this was buried deep. She flipped through it. Her own reports redacted, her recordings wiped. But inside was something new, a satellite ping from just before Fowler went dark. Not in Syria, not even in the air. It came from a small station outside Diyarbakir, Turkey, an unauthorized relay, masking signal data. What is this? She asked. Jensen lowered his voice. Black site. Not ours. Not officially. She stared at the folder, then back at him. You think that's where he got it? The tech? Jensen nodded. And maybe more. What do you mean? Jensen hesitated, then said it. We think someone on the inside gave him a flight key. Danny's jaw tightened. A kill switch. Yeah. She leaned back, exhaled slowly. So Fowler didn't crash, she said, the words heavy with revelation. He was taken down. Jensen didn't say yes. He didn't have to. And now Dragunov was out there with US stealth capability and custom control overrides because someone in their own system gave it to him. For what? Money. Ideology. Leverage. She didn't know. But she knew one thing. This wasn't a rogue pilot anymore. This was a weapon. One she helped build, even if she hadn't meant to. She stood, folder in hand. I want one more flight, she said. Jensen looked hesitant. We don't even have a target yet. We do now, she said, pointing to the Turkish relay coordinates on the printout. That's where he started. That's where I'll start. He studied her. You go alone. She nodded. If this is a trap, I'm the only one who knows how to walk into it. But even she didn't realize what Dragunov had waiting for her, or how far he'd go to make her choose. It was almost midnight when Danny touched down at the forward airstrip in southern Turkey. The heat still clung to the tarmac like smoke, even though the sun had set hours ago. The only light came from a single red bulb over the control tower and the flicker of her cockpit instruments shutting down. No welcoming committee, no backup team. That was the deal. She wanted it this way. 30 minutes later, she was walking across the open desert, alone, gear strapped to her back, tracker disabled. The coordinates had brought her to a ridge overlooking a long-dead communication outpost. Rusted satellite dishes, broken generators, and a low cement building with no windows. She pulled a small device from her jacket and scanned for heat signatures. Just one, inside the building. And he was waiting. She didn't knock. She just pushed the door open and stepped in. There he was. Nikolai Dragunov. Older now, face thinner, eyes darker, but still that same unnerving calm, like someone who knew what cards everyone else held and didn't care. I was wondering if you'd come, he said, sitting at an old steel desk like it was just another day at the office. You left a trail, Danny said, her voice flat. I knew you'd follow it. He didn't sit, didn't blink. What is this, Nick? Revenge? Grandstanding? He smiled faintly. It's truth, Danny. You spent your whole life following orders. Me. I learned what happens when you stop. You killed Fowler. No. They did. I just stopped playing the part they gave me. You could have come forward. You could have exposed them. And done what? Testify. Trust the system that buries pilots when they're no longer useful. He stood slowly, his body lean, deliberate, not like a soldier, but like something sharper. I didn't come here to fight, she said. Good. Because you'd lose. You're not faster than me. No, he said. But I'm freer. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the scar just beneath his left ear, a reminder of a crash landing he'd barely survived back when he was still one of theirs. Why show yourself now? She asked. Why not stay hidden? Because I want you to see what happens when the ones who follow orders finally say no. Then he handed her a small device, square metal, warm in her palm. She stared at it. What is this? Proof. Every log. Every recording. Everything they did to erase what happened. And not just to me. Fowler too. Other pilots. You weren't the only one they abandoned. She felt her stomach tighten. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you want. Walk away. Burn it. Or take it back and show them their lies don't get to live forever. She narrowed her eyes. And what about you? He shrugged. I'm done flying. That was always your thing. He walked past her, then out into the dark. No goodbye. No warning. And she let him go. She flew home 2 days later. Not as a soldier. Not as a hero. But as someone who'd finally seen the whole picture. She turned in the drive, left it on Jensen's desk without a word. 3 weeks passed. No call. No report. Then she got a letter. Anonymous return address. Inside was a note, 5 words printed on plain paper. You were right to leave. Danny Mercer moved again. New city, new name. But this time she didn't hide. She joined a pilot mentorship program in Arizona. Taught flight mechanics to kids who'd never touched a joystick before, showed them how to fly for themselves. Not for medals. Not for politics. Just for the sky. Every now and then, she'd glance at a clear blue horizon and remember. Not the crash. Not the betrayal. But the moment she chose to come back. Not for them. But for herself. That's what it means to come home. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. And coming back. That's strength.